Experience Karen Hunter in a completely different way. Karen Hunter is awesome. The podcast.
If you like me on SiriusXM Urban View Channel 126, you're going to love me. And Karen Hunter is awesome. Hey, this is Karen Hunter, host of The Karen Hunter Show on SiriusXM's Urban View. Karen Hunter is awesome is an actual podcast to bring heat and energy and knowledge and power. A 1-2 punch that I don't think you get anyplace else. Tell the truth. Check out the podcast wherever you get your podcast. You will not be disappointed. Let's go to Nick. Nick is in North Carolina, North Kakalaki. Welcome to the Karen Hunter Show. You're on with Don Calloway. Hi. Nick. All of this. I gave you the perfect intro, Nick.
Hello?
Okay. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Hi.
Today, Junior.
I just want to say, first of all, that I appreciate comments that you guys give, and yeah, just appreciate the show. But yeah, I mean, I understand that of being left out of some of the politics in terms of like, how do I get involved in things and sort of be active in them? And you know, we're dealing with a system that's sort of been built around this idea of economic and free enterprise. And, you know, if you sort of chase the Project 2025 and he goes back to Heritage Foundation, which started with Coors family, had this strong sort of ideological view on how systems should work. And it should be this free economic with minimal government involvement. And so that's what we're seeing right now, this sort of play out. And I guess, you know, how we respond to it is, again, organizing, being involved, connecting with labor unions. And yeah, that's all I wanted to share.
Okay. So which one of those are you going to be rolling up your sleeves? Is this your first time calling, Nick?
Yeah, first time. I never had Sirius, whatever it's called, Sirius. Yeah, so I finally I found this channel. It was like whatever this station. I was like, oh, this is great. So I really appreciate it a lot.
Okay, well, welcome. Channel 126, where talk empowers and becomes action. Yeah, this is unlike any place else you're going to find in radio because we're actually about solutions. We want everyone listening to win, to live life and life abundantly. We are sick and tired of what's happening right now, but it's our responsibility, we the people, to do something. So, Nick, where are you going to put your hands in this soil?
You know, so I work in harm reduction. Which it's basically a network of people that the war on drugs has significantly impacted people. And it's funny that Trump brings up this thing of fentanyl and this sort of fear. And it's just it's ridiculous. It's absurd, you know, that they're using that. And that's how they create their movement in a lot of ways. And their change is like with scaring people. You know, they use like keywords like fentanyl and, you know, again, harm reduction is the idea that, hey, like people are going to die, but like, let's try to make it safer as possible. And so I get involved that way. In terms of the bigger problems, I still don't know, you know, I can't vote because I went to jail, but yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, in North Carolina, they still, you paid your debt to society and they still, because I know certain states like Florida reverse that, and most states actually. There are states like Vermont where you can vote while you're incarcerated because you should not lose rights because you've been incarcerated to be represented. So you were formerly incarcerated, and have you tried to apply to vote, or you just assume that you can't?
Yet.
Okay.
You know, I just been getting educated on this stuff, on this sort of political climate, and like I said, I've never really voted before, and so I'm like still learning. But I think, you know, we bring up this idea of like leadership, and it's like, well, this change isn't just voting one person in that sort of steers it. It happens in a democratic fashion of multiple people coming together. And I like the idea that you said that people that are sort of outside of the norm of being, you know, in political involvement or public life, brings those peoples in. So those are my people, if that makes sense.
No, it's good. I mean, we honor Fannie Lou Hamer here, somebody that I'm sure the establishment would not have handpicked to represent, but she didn't ask for permission. She was like, listen, your freedom is shackled and chained to mine. Until I'm free, you're not free. Let me get out in these streets and say the things that need to be said how I say them. Don, what are your thoughts on Nick? And welcome to the Calling family. Nick, don't be a stranger. Go ahead.
Shout out to brother Nick. Let's be very clear about something. Most states allow people with previous incarceration, even felonies, some level of voting rights. Whether it's after 10 years after getting off papers, it goes from it runs the gamut from, like you said, Vermont, you can vote while incarcerated, to some states where felons are still lost for life. But I will tell you that being ineligible to vote for life as a result of having a felony is now largely a thing of the past in this country. And I tried to look it up while you were talking, Brother Mark, and I couldn't find it in time. But there are please Google felon voting rights. And this is not just about Mark in North Carolina. I suspect you can probably vote, but people need to understand that regardless of your criminal history, you need to understand whether or not you can vote in your state, because it is no longer an automatic disqualifier. And that's something that we need to take out of our lexicon as just saying, I'm a felon, I can't vote, because that's no longer just the blanket truth across the country. Right. But listen, man, I salute you.
Wait, let me just correct. His name is Nick. Also,
forgive me, Nick. Forgive me.
No. But Nick in North Carolina, it's alliteration. We love that. But also, to your point, the messaging around voting. And I believe if you paid your debt to society, you shouldn't have to check a box, especially if we have a 34-time convicted felon in the White House. There are no more boxes to check. If you can be the president, you should be able to get a job in this country, having served your debt, right? That's what they say. You've gone through the system, you got out, you're paroled. You should be able to not only vote, but also get a job without checking a box. Because what does it matter if you could be president?
That's right. That's right.
I digress. Continue.
But one thing I think that Nick is onto and is doing is finding a way to actively participate in political processes and political advocacy, whether or not he can vote. And there are some people, unfortunately, because of their felon status or immigration status, who cannot vote. But if you wake up and your feet is on the ground in the United States, you have an opportunity to advocate and participate. Perhaps I'm not even going to call it a responsibility, but you certainly have an opportunity. So shout out to you, Nick, for recognizing that.
Period. I appreciate that. And it's nice that people just, kind of finding us, the urban view thing throws them, it's like, this is for black people. But here's what everyone needs to know. And I think most of the listeners know this, those without melanin, that if we focus on the folk that you deem the least of society, everybody wins. Everybody wins. The trickle down don't work. Making rich people richer is never going to work. But making poor people solvent. I just did a podcast with my mom, who grew up in the projects in Augusta, Georgia, and we were having a conversation. It was a larger conversation, but I pulled that little piece out because that was a leg up for a lot of people. She talked about several of her classmates being able to buy homes out of that. Her mom paid $15 a month in rent, and it allowed her to feed a family of 4 and still work under the table and do the things. But they were able to move up. So by the time I came along, my grandmother was in a house. You know what I'm saying? But that's the way this country should function with people who don't have, Yeah. But we don't do that. We demonize them so that the 1% can get richer. That can't be the way forward.
It can't. And let's be honest about something else. Whether or not you have or don't have in this country has very little to do with merit. And we have adopted this false notion that people who don't have don't deserve, or people who don't have is because of some fault or error of their own. I was in Alabama over the Thanksgiving holiday, incredibly joyous time. And I was there with all of my family and extended family. And we were in basically a home that's the equivalent of a triple wide, right? But it's warm physically and metaphorically. And there's love in it. And there's great food. And it's amazing. And I was sitting there watching multiple generations of folks who are, again, effectively crowded into a triple wide. And we're pointing out, talking about, she went to Tuskegee, she went to State, she went to A&M, she went to Mississippi Valley State, he went to Jackson. And then we're talking to the juniors and seniors in high school. Where you gonna go? And a bidding war starts in the most country hood ass, black ass home about where we send our babies to college and why. These are folks with multi-generational college degrees. But the world would look at them and say that they're working poor. No, these are people who have played by the rules, right? These are folks who are no less deserving than any of these upper middle class fancy folks who think that they are not going to be doged because you got a 2-car garage and a Peloton. So we have to divest ourselves of these notions of deserving and value and merit, because in many respects, it's all been mythology. It's not a meritocracy. It's the mythology of meritocracy. And I think that when you see the Trump administration and its minions get on television talking about meritocracy, they have mastered talking points. They are not people who have actually achieved anything in this country based on merit. And when you talk about who deserves and who doesn't deserve, or the poor people being there because they deserve it, that conversation never goes our way, right? And I know it's not just Black folks in this audience, but I can tell you from my experience and that of my family, that conversation, we don't ever end up on the long end of that stick, right?
No. Facts.
Experience Karen Hunter in a completely different way. Karen Hunter is awesome. The podcast.
If you like me on SiriusXM Urban View Channel 126, you're gonna love me. And Karen Hunter is awesome. Hey, this is Karen Hunter, host of the Karen Hunter Show on SiriusXM's Urban View. Karen Hunter is awesome is an actual podcast to bring heat and energy and knowledge and power, a 1-2 punch that I don't think you get anyplace else. Tell the truth. Check out the podcast wherever you get your podcast. You will not be disappointed.